Michelle, are we all good to go? Okay. And I will call to order the Wednesday, August 1st meeting of the Reno City Planning Commission, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll ask Commissioner Weisky to lead us tonight. All right, thank you. Michelle, can we have roll call, please?
Okay, Peter Gower. Here. Ed Hawkins. Here. Britton Griffith is absent. John Marshall is absent. Paul Olivas.
Here.
Kevin Weisky.
Here.
Mark Johnson.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Next on our agenda is public comment. This item is for either public comment or any action item or any general public comment. Michelle, do we have any requests to speak on this item?
No, we do not.
Is there anyone here who would like to speak under this item of public comment? Seeing none, we'll close that and move on to approval of the minutes, starting with the minutes from the Planning Commission meeting on June 7th. Looking for any comments or a motion.
Mr. Hawkins, motion for the minutes to be accepted.
Have a motion?
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And then the minutes from the June 20th Planning
Commissioner
Commission
Weisky,
meeting.
so moved.
Have a motion?
Commissioner will leave a second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor? Opposed?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Gower, I need to abstain. I was not at that meeting.
Just going for abstentions next, so you beat me to it. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item number 5, City Council Liaison Reports.
I have nothing from Councilwoman Breckus.
Okay. All the way to item number 6, we're moving on to public hearings. First item on our agenda is case number LDC 18-00102. Before presentation, I will turn it over to Commissioner Weisky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I need to recuse myself from this item. My employer has an active project with the architect on this job, and I don't want to have any conflicts of interest going on. So call me when you're ready.
Understood. Thank you. We'll get you back here in a bit. Okay. With that, we will start with a presentation from the applicant.
Thank you. Susan Pansky for the record, representing the High Street Townhomes
Susan,
project.
can you put the microphone up on the podium there? Start your timer
No,
when you start
do
talking.
Do I need to do it up here?
Yeah,
Okay.
that way we can hear you.
It's probably better to put it up there than to squat down and
Yeah.
talk to it
Okay,
at the
how's
low
that?
elevation.
Okay.
Okay, now you can start.
I always feel like it's right in my face right
Okay.
here. Okay. I'm here tonight representing the High Street Townhomes project on behalf of Mardian Development. Mike Mardian is in the audience with me, as well as Jason Gillis from Tech. The High Street Townhomes project site is located in downtown Reno on the corner of Mill Street and High Street on about a half an acre as shown in this vicinity map. It's an infill project within the downtown core, and it is proposed to replace an underutilized parking area. You'll note on the site plan that an existing building to the east is also on this parcel. We have submitted a parcel map to split that out from the project site, and that's in process with City of Reno now. This slide shows the proposed lot areas. We're proposing a tentative map for 16 single-family townhomes. It incorporates a neo-traditional design with rear-loading garages, and they're accessed by alleys both on the property and off of the property. So we have a private alley proposed between the two buildings, and then this is an existing alley to the south of the project. The north row of homes here will have doors facing Mill Street, and the south row of homes will have doors facing the internal alleyway. These individual parcels will be the footprints of the townhomes. They're showed in the gray areas on this exhibit, and then the common areas are the hatched areas surrounding them. The townhomes are proposed to be a combination of 1- and 2-story homes. at, two-story homes at 1 and 2 bedrooms each. Now, this site plan's a little bit busier, but it depicts some of the amenities on the site. It shows the proposed garage parking for all of the units. On the 2-bedroom units, which are located on the ends, there are 2-car garages, and then the internal units each have 1-car garages for a total of 20 parking spaces on site. We're proposing paver driveways, both on the internal alley and also south onto the existing alley. In addition to sidewalks internally that will also connect to the sidewalk that is already present on Mill Street and High Street. We're proposing landscape areas, which are the non-hatched areas here, and then adjacent to the buildings here and here and here, as well as some patio areas in the rear of the buildings. One thing I'd like to note is, I'm going to go back. Before I go on to this one thing I'd like to note, and I think it's pretty obvious from the vicinity map, is the incredible walkability of this site. Not only does it have an RTC bus stop adjacent to it, but it's located in the downtown core and is within a walk or a bike ride in a very short distance to lots of services, retail, and all sorts of human services. This is our preliminary landscape plan. It generally shows landscaping on the site and proposed trees that we intend to install. What isn't shown on this site plan is an addition of pedestrian benches that will be provided along Mill Street, generally in this area, along this sidewalk, and then also along the internal alleyway. These are the proposed elevations for this project. They are highly articulated with a contemporary design. This is the Mill Street and the High Street elevations. So this would face Mill Street. All of the buildings on the front side have a covered entryway as well as a fenced-in patio area, and that's what's shown in the red here. And then the rear of the buildings, this faces the alley and the existing building to the east. Each one has a dedicated garage there, and then there's also a dedicated private balcony area on the second floor. And then finally, a 3D rendering of this project from the High Street and Mill Street sides. This shows the high level of articulation and the concept that we're proposing in this area, and we believe that it's a benefit to the community and a high quality addition to the downtown core that will further help to revitalize the area. So with that, I'm done with my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, thanks. Get a presentation from staff and call you back with any questions.
Good evening, Chair Johnson, members of the Planning Commission, Jeff Borkart, Associate Planner for the record. Susan did a great job overviewing the presentation, so I don't need to go back and show you all the slides again, but I did want to let you know that there's some back history to this project. There was a previously approved tentative map for condominiums at this location. The applicant has decided to go in a different direction and propose townhomes at this location. There are 16. The California Avenue District within the downtown Reno Regional Center requires a minimum density of 21 dwelling units per acre. This is at 34, so they're really providing some good density. As Susan mentioned, there is walkability and it is close to a number of different services. And with that, it is infill development, meets all the development standards and code. What's interesting is if this didn't have a subdivision component to it and this was just multifamily, they'd be allowed to build this by right. And so because they're doing the subdivision, it requires a tentative map, and that's what's before this commission tonight. So there was no comments from the public, and when presented to the Ward 3 NAB, they were extremely supportive of the project. And so with that, planning staff is recommending approval, and I'm available for any questions as well. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Jeff. This is a public hearing, but before I get to public comment, I will bring it back to the commission for disclosure, starting with Commissioner Olivas.
Commissioner Olivas, I visited the site.
Commissioner Johnson, as did I.
Commissioner Gower, as did I.
Mr. Hawkins, as did I.
Okay, thank you. Now I will open public comment on this item. Michelle, do we have any request to speak forms?
No, we do not.
Is there anyone in the audience wishing to make a comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission for questions. Who'd like to get us started? Commissioner Hawkins?
Thank you, Chair. For Jeff, please. Jeff, I've thumbed through this twice and I haven't found a report on the police department as far as cameras or anything they can do to make the building more secure once it's completed.
My apologies if it wasn't included. I will take a look at the staff or the comments, and I'll come back up. Let me just dig through the file real quick, please.
I guess this next question is for Claudia. On page 7 of the staff report, under the heading Master Plan, it says this request is being evaluated under the recently adopted Reimagine Reno Master Plan. Are we good with this? And
I'm sorry, are we good? with this?
has it been evaluated
Yes.
since we, okay, so we're
Yes.
cool?
Yep.
Okay, thank
we're
you.
cool.
While Jeff is thumbing through his files, does anyone have any additional questions? I do have one, actually, Janelle, Shawnee. I see both of you sitting there, and I inevitably call it the wrong person. I just had a quick question on the proposed alley that's there and the separation distance between that alley and Mill Street. Are we okay with all of the roadway clearances and sight lines and everything else based on what you're looking at with the tentative map?
Shawnee Dunnigan, Associate Civil Engineer for the record. Yes, we have all the clearances we need in that alley.
Okay, thank you.
To address Commissioner Hawkins' point, Jeff Borkart, Associate Planner for the record. On page 5 of the staff report, there is, under the first paragraph of the public safety section, it does say the Reno Police Department staff did not identify any major concerns regarding this project. Construction considerations and maintenance suggestions were provided. They include, but are not limited to, installation of security strike plates with 3-inch screws, door hinges with pins, 180-degree peephole, additional window and slider locks, and implementation of a neighborhood watch program.
Thank you, Jeff.
Additional questions, comments, or a motion? Commissioner Gower?
Mr. Chairman, I'm ready to make a motion. I just want to say, if you're willing, if you're ready for the motion.
I'm ready for the motion.
Okay, I just wanted to make one comment that I thought it was interesting, that our minimum density in this area is 21 dwelling units per acre. And this is getting to 34, which is fantastic. And I think it gives us a really good idea of a project and what 34 dwelling units per acre looks like. And that it's not that hard to get to 34 dwelling units per acre. So I appreciate the proponent going above and beyond to hit that density, especially adjacent, literally right next to a transit stop. So I think it really is TOD development at its best here. So with that, I would like to make a motion in the case of LDC 18-00102 High Street Townhomes. Based upon compliance with the applicable findings, I move to approve the tentative map, subject to conditions.
Thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second? Commissioner Olivas?
Commissioner Olivas, I will second, and I can also make all the findings.
You. So I have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All
I
those
just
in-
want to compliment the group for doing a pretty nice rendering of what it's going to look like. I think it's going to be sweet.
Agreed. Okay. Motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Good luck with your project. Okay, so we will wait for Commissioner Weisky to find his way back. And move on to our next item, which is 6.2, case number LDC 18-00099, the 395 Craft Beer and Spirits Pub. Welcome
Here I am
back.
again. Susan Pansky, Rubicon Design Group for the record. So on this item, I'm here representing the 395 Saloon LLC. Brett Schaefer is here in the audience with me as well, representing the applicant. This project is located in the North Hills Shopping Center on North Hills Boulevard, west of Golden Valley Road. We're proposing a new bar use called the 395 Craft Beer and Spirits Pub in a 1,600 square foot tenant space located within this shopping center. We're here tonight before you because we need a special use permit to allow the establishment of a new bar, as well as to allow for a new non-residential use located adjacent to residentially zoned property. The proposed bar use is consistent with the retail uses in the center, including existing restaurants and an existing casino that also serve alcohol. Hours of operation for this facility are proposed from 2 p.m. to 11 p.m., which is significantly less than some of the other services that are located in the center. These are some of the site photos of the existing center. For those that aren't familiar, this is the Rayleigh's Center located off of Golden Valley Road. The lower left photo here is the location of the actual tenant space that the applicant will be occupying. This is the proposed site plan. The 395 will be located to the west of the Rayleigh's as shown, and all public access to this facility will be from the existing parking lot to the south. It'll minimize impacts to the future residential area to the north, as no access from the public will be allowed from that side. No outdoor uses are proposed at this time, so that will further serve to mitigate any impacts should that north site be developed. One of the things that we looked at as a part of this project was the parking for the site. There are actually 573 existing parking spaces in this center, and our parking analysis indicated that with our bar use, which is right here at 1 per 110 square feet, we need 14 and a half spaces roughly for ours, and that would bring the total to 571, which is just too shy of the maximum. So we are within our allowed parking area. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer questions if you have them.
Thank you, Susan. We'll let you know. Yeah, move on to staff. Kyle. Good evening.
Thank you, Chairman Johnson and Commissioners. Kyle Chisholm, Assistant Planner for the record. So what you have before you tonight is a special use permit for a new bar use located in the community commercial zone. It's located adjacent to residential property, so there's two triggers for the special use permit in this case. You can see the SF-15 zone property directly to the north of the site there. There is the current or the nearest developed residential property is up there off of Beckworth to the north. That's the Wild Stallion Estate subdivision, which this center, let me put a new slide up. As you can see, this is oriented towards the south. It's a fully developed site. The 395 Craft Pub is going just to the west of the Rayleigh's there in an existing 1,600 foot tenant space. With that said, I mean, this was a pretty straightforward request. There's been uses. I do want to highlight there's a casino, as the applicant's representative stated, that's been operating there for 24 hours, serves alcohol. There's also been numerous restaurants, including a bar that was established there that's no longer a business, but was at one time that was 24 hours and served alcohol. With the orientation of the existing site, staff didn't feel there was going to be any impacts on the adjacent residential. There was one condition added or proposed that would limit the outdoor activities on the north side of the building. There's also a school, Alice Smith Elementary, directly to the northeast of the site. That combined with the residential to the north, staff felt that that condition was fair to reduce any proposed outdoor activities on the north side of the building in the future. That being said, staff can make all the applicable findings and recommends approval of the project.
Thank you, Kyle. Again, public hearing, so before I do that, I'll bring it to the commission for disclosures. I'll start with Commissioner Weisky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I visited the site.
Commissioner Hawkins, as did I.
Commissioner Johnson, as did I, and I believe I received a couple of emails from staff on this as well.
Commissioner Olivas, as did I.
Okay, for public hearing, Michelle, do we have any requests to speak forms on this item?
No, we do not.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to make a comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, bring it back to the commission for questions, comments, discussion. Commissioner Weisky.
Motion, if you're ready, Mr. Chairman.
That was the next word of my coming out, so.
Great. In the case of LDC 18-00099, based upon compliance with the applicable findings, I move to approve the special use permit, subject to conditions, and I can make all of the findings.
Okay, thank you. A motion. Do I have a second? Commissioner Olivas.
Commissioner Olivas, I'll second, and I can also make all the findings.
Okay, I think you have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Good luck with your project. All right, the next item on our agenda is item 6.3, case number LDC 18-00104. Before we get started on this one, I will let the commission know that I need to recuse from this item as my employer was involved in the preparation of the special use permit. With our vice chair also being out, somebody will need to be appointed to chair this item. So, so I would ask for a volunteer or a nomination from the commission to chair this item. So,
Commissioner Hawkins, I'll nominate Commissioner Weisky.
Commissioner Weisky, you've been nominated to chair this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Unless you're opposed, I would ask for the rest of the commissioners to signify their approval, and I will take my leave for this item. Thank you.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, guys. I'll remember that later. All right. Let's continue on with our meeting then. Next on our agenda is case number LDC 18-00104, NV Energy Ohm Operations Center. If the applicant's representative will come forward, please introduce himself. You will have 15 minutes to describe your project to us.
Good evening, Derek Kirkland with Wood Rogers for the record, representing NV Energy. So the project's located off of Mill and Rock Boulevard, Edison to the east. It's referred to as the NV Energy Ohm Operations Facility. I'm sure we probably all familiar with it, but it is currently in the master plan is mixed employment, which allows for industrial. Its zoning is IC. And so to give you a little background on the property, so it was originally developed back in the 1960s by Sierra Pacific Power Company, which is now NV Energy. And back then there was a population of about 100,000. They had similar uses. One Ohm, which is off of Mill Street, is their primary functions there. They have their new businesses in there. They have operations in there, and then they have some flex space, which is used for some of their gas shops and what have you. And then over the years, it's developed as the population's grown. A lot of NV Energy's uses have also expanded with that population growth. And back in 2013, they actually acquired about 16.5 acres on the east side of the property, closer to Rock Boulevard. Part of the condition for them to access that property with the city was to actually punch Ampere through. Right now, Ampere, you can see kind of the cul-de-sac there, it stops, and so that construction's underway. It's pretty much wrapped up, and so Ampere is actually goes all the way from Edison now with a connection to Rock Boulevard. And so they purchased that property mainly as over the years, they've kind of outgrown a lot of their outdoor storage area. You can see the pole area there, and they have a bunch of wire reels and some different transformers, and they also use for staging to set up for jobs to replace power poles in their gas shop. And so they purchased that property knowing that they were outgrowing their space. And so in 2017, we actually helped them with the facilities master plan to kind of look at the site and what we needed to do to address the population that's approaching 500,000 for this area today. So part of this larger project I'll be talking about is mainly a project that came out of that master plan. Some of the existing site conditions, so you can see 1 ohm there. That building's definitely outlived its useful life, and so part of this project is going to be to replace that building. And you can see a lot of the spaces that they have inside of that building, conference rooms shared next to lockers and multiple desks. So their goal is to really use this project to kind of expand to meet the need today, but also kind of start to accommodate for, you know, what the future growth is going to be as well. Oops. So looking at some of their existing uses in the top here, so that yellow is that vacant property. The purple is basically where they have their outdoor storage uses today. Again, you have a bunch of wire reels and different materials over here. Poles are down in this area. They have a lot of transformers here, but also kind of scattered over here. They have where they work on a lot of the larger poles kind of in the center, and they have some more large pole storage over here. They have some material storage up in the corner here with a kind of a staging area and some miscellaneous storage over here. So you can kind of see the way the site's configured now. With the old Ohm Road used to go through, it's now private property. And that really creates some issues for them circulation-wise. It kind of bisects the site, so when the guys are trying to get the poles to the staging area and you've got large trucks coming through, it just creates a lot of conflicts, a lot of inefficiencies in their operations. And again, as I mentioned, 1 ohm is just, they've exceeded the space, it's outdated. They have their fleet services down here, even though all the vehicles are parked over here. So part of this project is really trying to reorganize this site. And so what you can see down here in the lower section is kind of what we've come up with in terms of trying to get all their outdoor storage kind of in one area, taking advantage of that 16.5 acres. Part of that 16.5 acres, they're looking at doing a 4-acre training site. As technology changes, they need to get new guys in there as well and train them on the materials they're working with. The hatched area is basically the area that's going to stay untouched. And the big improvements on the site, other than adding the outdoor storage to the west, is on the east side is this new proposed building that'll basically replace 1 ohm. 1 ohm will actually be demoed once that's completed. And the nice thing about this new building is it's going to have all the public access off of Edison Way, which has a stoplight up on Mill Street. Currently, a lot of their employees in public are accessing directly on the mill from Ohm. There's no stoplight there, so they're making left-hand turns, not super safe. And then all the employee parking gets put onto one side of the building. So basically, the thought is with all the employee parking up here, is basically they get there for the day. They get to the building, they go to their office, their locker, their ready room, and then they can go right down to the blue, which is where we're going to put the new their company vehicle parking, so the line trucks and all their company vehicles. And then there'll be a new entrance for the company vehicles on Ampere to kind of keep the company vehicles separated from the employee vehicles and kind of create a safer situation. And also, Ohm Place will no longer go through the site. It'll basically serve as kind of a secondary access and provide, they get a lot of large material deliveries, which will be able to come in that way without intermingling with some of the traffic there. So, a pretty big improvement for this site. Basically, the building area stays the same. The outdoor storage is probably the biggest expansion, but again, it's not substantial. It's really kind of taking advantage of that new acreage that they purchased. Parking and circulation increases a little bit to make a little more room for their large company vehicles. And then the landscape area we actually increased by about 2 acres. So this gives you an idea of the site plan. So you can see here, this is that new building. And so what we've done is basically put the employee parking there, public parking here. You can see this new layout for all their company vehicles, nice large pull-through spaces. Again, over here's their smaller company vehicles. And then what that does is basically keep all the vehicle traffic on one end, all the employees and public on one end, and then basically opens up the site so they can have all their staging areas and all their outdoor storage kind of contiguous into one space. And then again, once this building is completed, 1 ohm will actually be demoed. And so they have, along Ampere, they have a lot of existing screening. You can see a picture of that, and that's been in place for a long time. And so what we wanted to do is not take that out, because it's already providing a great screening benefit today. So everywhere in yellow, you can see that's basically existing landscaping that will remain in place. And that corner right there by their receiving area is already fairly screened. The section that just got completed to extend Ampere will actually get upgraded to have that new screening with the tall pine trees and evergreens, and basically a chain link fence with the colored slats similar to what they have around the property today. And then along Mill Street, there's a lot of landscaping along Mill Street today, and so the thought was it's nice landscaping, but we're going to add street trees and kind of improve that, and again bring in that screening element there. And then all along Edison in front of this new building will all be brought up to code in terms of landscaping. So that's where that 2 acres of landscaping comes from. Some of the other benefits of the project, obviously the replacement of 1 ohm will give them the space that they need. It increases from about 50,000 square feet of space to about 126,000 square feet of space. That'll help them a lot. Safety benefits, kind of keeping pedestrians where pedestrians need to go with nice walkways, and kind of the flow of the pedestrian traffic away from the kind of the vehicle traffic, and then letting them do their normal business with the staging areas and circulation patterns for their outdoor storage kind of off to the side with the warehouse. The other thing we're going to be looking at too is drainage improvements, and then bringing the outdoor storage into more into conformance with additional screening, and basically using an all-weather surface for those areas instead of the dirt, which is a lot of the surface now. Excuse me. And then, the other thing we talked about is sidewalks. So instead of putting sidewalk along Mill and along Ampere, there's no sidewalk on any of those streets. And so our thought was, why build sidewalk to nowhere? A lot of this is a developed industrial area, and so it's probably never going to get sidewalk along that area. So what we did is worked with staff to basically propose to put in a sidewalk along Edison that will come up to Mill Street, and then we'll work with RTC to put in a bus stop and a bus pad there. So it creates better connectivity for kind of where the front door is, basically. And there's also a lot of businesses along Edison that'll benefit from that as well. Here's the rendering of what the new 1 ohm building will look like. The front building will have some nice architecture, can make a nice public entrance, a nice entrance for the employees, and then we'll separate kind of that shop space. The flex space will be in the back and kind of serve that function with the company vehicles. And so the last piece, and why we're here tonight, a lot of the project would be allowed outright by code, with the exception that because we are in the industrial commercial zoning designation, it only allows 20% of the site to be outdoor storage, and you cannot exceed the square footage of building. This site has exceeded that since the 60s, and so when we worked with staff, we said, hey, we could do a zone change it to industrial, or we could look at doing an SUP for the non-conforming use. And since it was such a small piece of the project, and the area is IC, we worked with staff to basically, if NV Energy were to leave, which is probably not realistic in the near future, we wouldn't want this site to be industrial and have a use that may come in and may not be compatible with the surrounding area. So essentially, the outdoor storage is an allowed use in the IC area. It's basically just the amount of outdoor storage, and so IC allows 20%. If we were industrial, it would allow 100%. NV Energy's at about 50%. So there's no in between there. So that's where I think the SUP for the amount of outdoor storage comes into play. All the other requirements in the IC zoning designation for the requirements of outdoor storage screening, all that stuff, additional landscape, all the improvements we're going to do to the site, those are all going to be in conformance with that. And then the other thing we want to kind of mention too is that the outdoor storage is essential to NV Energy's operations. When we have power outages, this is a site where they keep the poles, the additional wires, any extra parts they have. It's all stored in this site. So it's been an essential function to their business, and it's going to remain that way as our population grows. Having this site in this location is critical in that they have quicker response times, being centrally located no matter where the power outage is at in the region. So that's kind of where that SUP comes into play. And with that, I will be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Derek. Jeff, welcome again.
Good evening, Temporary Chair Weisky and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Jeff Borkart, Associate Planner. As Derek mentioned, the crux of this request is that it's to expand outdoor storage. Just get that level here real quick. The industrial commercial zoning designation only allows for 20% and caps it at the square footage of the buildings on site. And so they're not increasing the square footage of the buildings. If one of them goes away and they build this new building that's located right here on Edison, that's going to be the exact same square footage. So they're not net gaining any square footage, but they are gaining outdoor storage square footage. So this request, staff worked with the applicant in trying to consider whether or not it would be a good idea to do a zoning map amendment or a special use permit. We decided that doing a zoning map amendment and say NV Energy goes away and some other use comes in here, it's a heavy industrial user, they're not necessarily going to be the most compatible users with the surrounding industrial commercial properties. We said it might be better to go through the process to expand a non-conforming use so that we have the ability to condition the project, which you can't condition a zone change. You can condition a special use permit, and we can go through the process of making sure that we have adequate screening, that we're looking at how the open space functions on the overall site. And so that's why we recommended the special use permit process to go through. I did want to mention or highlight again that there is a condition in there to install a sidewalk from that new building on Edison all the way up to the corner of Edison and Mills so that they can have the connectivity to transit. They are removing that connectivity by removing 1 ohm in the existing transit station that's located along Mill Street. I also wanted to clarify condition number 2. In talking with the applicant, they were concerned with the provision to have all permits pulled within 18 months. And I did want to clarify that that is for the subject request of the special use permit. That's not for any future improvements on the site. We can't predict every single thing that's going to happen in the future. I can't make them pull every one of their future plans for the next 50 years on that site. And so this request is just for what's being presented here. If they plan on adding additional buildings in the future, that's actually going to be bringing the site further into conformance with today's standards and wouldn't necessarily need to come back for a special use permit. I did want to note the parking condition because this is the only weird aspect of this project. The applicant did propose an alternative parking rate. They proposed more parking on their plan than what the alternative parking rate says. So there's a condition in the staff report that's recommended that either says you either have to increase your landscaping, which is what code requires when you exceed 10% of what your required parking is, or you reduce the number of parking so that you don't exceed that. You're not 110% of your required parking. So that's in there to make sure that that they're providing the right amount of parking for what their necessary use is or the right amount of landscaping if they do exceed that parking rate. So with that, staff is available for any questions. We are recommending approval. The Ward 3 NAB was in support of the project as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. Before I get to public comment, commissioners for disclosures, please. Paul, would you start us?
Commissioner Levis, I visited the site and spoke with the applicant's representative.
Commissioner Gower visited the site.
Commissioner Hawkins visited the site, talked with the applicant and his representative.
Temporary Chair Weisky, I visited the site and spoke with the applicant's representative. And with that, I will open public comment. Michelle, do we have any requests to speak forums on this agenda item?
No, we do not.
Thank you. Is there anyone here in the audience this evening who would like to speak on this agenda item? Hearing and seeing none, I will close public comment, bring it back to the commission for questions. Discussion? Discussion. Commissioner Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Temporary Chair. Now, this one goes out to Jeff.
Was that my DJ request?
Page 5 on the staff report, item B. In bold print, the project is in substantial conformance with the master plan. That just gets to my craw. If we're doing non-conformance, how can this be substantially in conformance? Is this an oxymoron or something?
So the master plan and the code, two different things here. The code has a bunch of different standards. It's there to implement the master plan. The master plan is overall a policy document. And when we look at what's in substantial conformance, it's whether or not those policies within the master plan are being complied with. There could be a few policies within the master plan that aren't necessarily complied with, but the master plan doesn't get down to the level of you need this much open space or you can only have this much open space. It talks about the character of what the various different master plan land use designations are. And so when we look at this specific use, which has been in operations prior to this city annexing this in 1969, it still maintains that existing characteristic of what's already existing on site. And it does comply with those various different policies that are, and goals and guiding principles that are within our master plan.
Do you see in the future where we can get into conformance by them putting their new building on there or rearranging the parcels?
I can defer that to the applicant, but in my discussions with them, they do have intentions to go forward and build additional buildings in the future.
And will that trigger another look-see by us?
No, in fact, the purpose of this, they're expanding to the max footprint of what they own. Now, if they were expanding that non-conforming storage, outdoor storage again, sure, absolutely, that would require some sort of special use permit to come back before the Planning Commission. But if they're adding buildings on site, they're actually bringing it closer into conformance with what our current requirements are. So they wouldn't need to necessarily come back before the Planning Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Discussion. I have one item on discussion, and that is condition number 5. And although I applaud staff for always putting the diligent hours of construction in, because this is currently and has been a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week facility, and it is in an IC zoned area with no residential around it, I would not be opposed to eliminating condition 5 from this and allowing NV Energy to work the hours that they need to complete this. Jeff, if you'd like to comment on that.
I
go
think
ahead.
staff would be okay with that.
Thank you. And I did mention it to the applicant's representative, and the applicant and thought that was a favorable action on our part also. So whoever makes the motion, if there is consideration by you commissioners, since I will not lead it or be leading in my comments, I'll see if that pops up. If there's no other discussion, I'm ready for a motion, gentlemen.
Commissioner Gower, I'm ready to make a motion.
Please.
And in doing so, I just want to say that the finding for me was the special use finding, non-conforming use A, which talks about won't damage the character or quality of the neighborhood in which it's located. And for me, I was able to make that finding, and I think to get to Commissioner Hawkins, your point about the non-conforming piece of it, you know, we have the provisions in here in the findings for non-conforming uses. So I can do that. And I can also do it, Commissioner Weisky, with the removal of that condition 5. So let me scroll up to the number here for the motion. In the case of LDC 18-00104, NV Energy Ohm Operations Center, based upon compliance with the applicable findings, being able to make those as noted. I move to approve the special use permit, subject to the conditions, including the removal of condition number 5.
Thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Commissioner Hawkins, second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Good luck with your project. Mr. Chairman, the microphone and gavel are yours. We will gladly wait for your return.
You're doing so well.
I was. That was a nice word, was.
Thank you, temporary chair Weisky. That was great. I think I'm just going to refer to that all the time. Okay, moving on. Item 6.4, case number LDC 18-00058, 14 on Cash Hill. We'll start with a presentation from the applicant.
Good evening. Derek Kirkland with Wood Rogers for the record, representing the applicant BRG Homes. So, as you know, this was before you back in May. And so there was a couple things that happened that night. So one, the tentative map, the findings were met. The findings were met on that and the tentative map was approved. There was concerns with the special use permit. At the time, we had 3 special use permits, single-family townhomes, basically elevating the site plan review. And then the non-residential use adjacent to residential. And then we had the SUP. This round, there's no SUP based on our design changes. And there were concerns mainly with findings A, E, and H, which I'll touch on there. But just give you a little background, just kind of go through real quick. So Cash Hill Boulevard, basically to the kind of northeast of the project. Skyline Boulevard's just down here to the southeast. This is an infill project. This is a single family attached. You got NC here, some more NC on the corner over here. And then you have single family detached there to the south. The project is zoned neighborhood commercial, and so basically the residential adjacency, to do single family attached and NC, we had to add a live work component to there. So the front buildings, which I'll get to in a little bit, are actually the live work. They have direct access to Cash Hill. And so that triggers the residential adjacency due to the existing single-family detached SF6 zoning back here. And so site plan, since then, since we last met, not a whole lot of changes on the site plan. We did mainly focus on this back building here and kind of redesigning that based on the concerns we heard from the commissioners and also from the neighbors. And so mainly the design, floor plan wise, is basically there was a mix of 2 and 3 bedrooms with tandem garages. We were considering them daylight, and so there was some discussion about that. And so we removed that fill material that we'd cut out of the hill on this side, and this will be an export site. And these are true 2-story buildings now, and we switched them to 1-car garage with some living space on the first floor, with living space on the second floor. To kind of get rid of that SUP. And so we thought that was a good idea. And then the other changes, basically the changes, each of these units parks itself, and then we have 6 spaces on Cash Hill, so no changes there, and we still meet the 20% landscape. One of the things that came up was access, and so what we did is we went back and we wanted to meet with Reno Fire to make sure that our access was covered, and so they agreed that they can get around the building. However, it is a little tight back here, and so what we did is we put in a hammerhead here so that they have a secondary turnaround point there. If for some reason something were blocking back here, they would be able to come in, excuse me, and make that turn. So. Worked out the access. The applicant now has an access easement in place for this property. So, as I mentioned, May 3rd was last Planning Commission meeting. There was an appeal process that took place at the June 6th City Council meeting. We requested to be remanded back to Planning Commission. It was, we wanted to address the Planning Commission's concern, and we wanted a chance to work with the neighbors. We recognized we didn't do a good job of that the first time, and so it was the applicant wanted to go through that process and wanted to be a good neighbor there and meet with those neighbors and try to come up with a good solution. And so we met with them, with the neighbors on June 18th and proposed some changes. We did some additional survey, which you'll see in later slides, but we did survey of all the surrounding buildings to kind of see what the elevation of the surrounding buildings were so that we could make sure our building was compatible with those elevations. And then we made some significant design changes. One being we lowered the site. I believe Commissioner Weisky had asked some questions about site grading, and then Commissioner Johnson had brought up the question about, cutting this hillside out and actually shifting it around. We were sort of creating this daylight garage case, and so we agreed with that. We tried to get creative, and it was better off for the site and this location and compatibility and to meet the findings to make this a true two-story building. Which by removing that fill material, we actually re-looked at the grading, and so the access road, and I'll kind of go back here. So originally we had this pretty flat. We're constrained at this grade right here because of the existing building. The grade coming off Cash Hill is very steep, and we're not able to get access off of there. And so what we did was hold this grade, but we actually graded the road back so we could max out the driveways, which helped us actually drop the pads of these both units about a couple feet. And so that helped us not only lower the building, and then the other thing we looked at was redesigning the building, as I mentioned earlier. And so we were able to drop that building pretty significantly by removing that daylight garage. The neighbors had asked us if once with those proposed design changes, if we could mark where the approximation of that building would be. So we had our survey crew go out there and put stakes in the ground at each corner of the back building and at a midpoint. I know it's a little hard to see. I try to use you can see the balloons right there. And so basically what we did is when we surveyed it, we found that this deck is at about a 4922. And so we try to build our building, the max height of our building at the floor of their deck, which would be consistent with also the commercial building adjacent to us has a 4922 elevation on their roof as well. So we staked the balloons, try to give them an idea of we showed them our plans, and then we kind of set the balloons just so they could kind of see how that would be relative to their second story there. So going over the findings, I think, touching on A was a finding that couldn't be met. This was compatible with existing surrounding land use and development. Land use, I think, were definitely compatible. You can see the single family attached on two sides, neighborhood commercial on one side, and single family attached is compatible with single family detached. Again, this is going to be a complete export site, no more cuts and fills, SUP, and so that helped us drop the site and kind of be more compatible with the surrounding developments. This front building will still step down, which is similar to the buildings next to us. And so when we flew our drone out there to check the elevation. So basically that front building is about a 4916. And so our lower building's a 4916. So essentially an extension of the existing building. And then similar to the step down of kind of this whole area, the commercial building next to us is at a 4922. We're at a 4922, which is also the deck floor elevation behind us. So it's compatibility-wise with elevations. We feel like we've come down almost 10 feet to make this a better situation for everybody, make it a compatible elevation in terms of where the roof lines are, and try to come up with as much of a compromise as we possibly could. And still have a viable project. So I think the other thing to touch on here is basically the upper building here is a 4928. And then the only one that's above us, and then the other building that's behind us is actually their patio. It's a single story where these are two stories. A lot of these over here, single stories, and they're already impacted by this commercial building. And their windows on this one here, even though they're lower than the building, they actually will have a view corridor between the buildings, and their main windows are basically to the right here. So when we went through the findings, the other ones that were brought up were E. I think a lot of this was, the scale of the building, the height of the building. And so what we did is, as I mentioned, is once we kind of learned what the elevations were, that 4922, so you can see that we carried that through on the redesign of this building. So there's no daylight garage in here. It's completely cut. We're actually dropping the pad a couple more feet to try to get that down as much as possible. And so what we did was, with this exhibit, is showed where the previous building was, and then you can see where the new building is. And essentially, what that does is allow somebody that's out on those second-story balconies to basically look over the project area. And so I've identified, height-wise, compatible. I think setbacks, you can see they have a 20-foot setback. We're slightly over 20 feet, but setbacks, we were able to meet that. I think the architectural design with the step down, shifting, they have their decks on the front, and so what we did, there was also a concern with H about placement of windows and privacy, and previously we had the rooftop deck up here, and so we recognized that could create some impacts. So what we did is move the rooftop decks to the front, and actually use the roof to screen those so that there's no privacy issues. The windows in the back of the building, because we've dropped it, the windows in the back of the building are actually below the adjacent fence line. So I think we've kind of addressed the window issues, moved the deck to the front for privacy reasons. And then we've dropped the building heights, like I said, almost 10 feet to get those to where they're at the deck floor elevation behind us, and basically similar to the adjacent buildings. So going over some specific design changes here. So as I mentioned, no cuts, fills, dropped the site a couple feet. We've basically the building was at 35 feet, which is allowed by code. We've changed that to 27.2 feet to make sure that we're keeping below that 4922. And then basically remove that daylight garage. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we shifted the building, or the windows, so that they're below. You can see the fence here, so we shifted the windows below that. And then we moved the rooftop deck to the front. So I think what we've done is basically tried to the best of our ability to try to lower this building as much as we physically could, in keeping with code. So we still meet code. We're trying to be more aggressive than code with this design change. So to give you an idea, this is those upper units. If you're standing in the alleyway, you could see the rooftop decks are about every other one. So you can see how we're using that roof to basically screen those so that they have no views back into the neighbor's house. Here you can see, if you're looking from the neighbor's backyard, you'd basically, their fence line, to give you an idea, their fence line would sit kind of above that brown area. So those windows will sit below the fence line. Not a whole lot of change on the Cash Hill side. This is a side view. And on those upper units, you could see that we've tried to kind of minimize those windows on the sides of the buildings. But again, we've really dropped the height of that upper building to kind of address the concerns. And so I think to conclude my presentation, I think what we've tried to do is go back. We definitely listened to all the comments from both commissioners and from planning, or from the neighbors. We've met with the neighbors. We've talked to staff, and we've looked at the grading. We've messed with the building design, and I think what we've come up with is a good compromise. We lost some square footage out here, but that's what happens when you make a compromise. And so our goal is to really keep that 4922 so that when they're on their deck, they can see over our project. We honored their request to put the balloons up. And I think compatibility-wise, we've tried to stay compatible with the building heights that are surrounding us and kind of keep that same level. And we recognize that, we didn't do a good job of that the first time, which is why we asked City Council to remand us back and give us a second chance to really look hard at it, and I think we've done that. We meet code, building height-wise, we exceed code, exceed code in a positive way to keep that height down. And I think at this point, I think we've addressed all the findings, we've addressed all the code issues, and I think we have a good project that is a good compromise for the surrounding area. And with that, that concludes my presentation, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you, Derek. Turn it over to Jeff.
Good evening again, Planning Commission. Jeff Borkhardt, Associate Planner for the record. Derek did a great job going over all the various different modifications that were made in terms of lowering the height, in terms of reducing the grading. One of the biggest concerns that was mentioned at the Planning Commission was that they were importing fill material into the site and essentially justifying a third story through the use of building it into this fill material. Since they're exporting now on the site, there is no longer going to be fill material. They've dropped that story down to 2 stories, which falls below most of the decks there. There is that 4219 one. But the SUPs that are there, so there's no longer an SUP for grading anymore, but the SUPs that are there are for the residential adjacency and for the townhome use. And so the tentative map still exists for the townhomes. I wanted to clearly note that all the standards on this project are met. We've come through the code. Every single code standard is met. And I know we did receive one comment letter that was forwarded to the Planning Commission the other day concerned with parking. Those and access on the site, those standards, all the parking standards are met. They're meeting the townhome standards to a T. In addition to that, Station 7 drove an engine around the site, and they were able to completely get around the project. So that was it. Staff is able to make all the findings at this point. We are recommending approval on the project. I am available for any questions if the Planning Commission has any. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. For the public hearing, I do have some requests to speak forms. Before I open that up, I'll have the commission with disclosures, starting with Commissioner Weisky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Same disclosures as last time, and I would like to add that I received and read additional emails and spoke with the applicant's representative about this new design.
Commissioner Hawkins, as did I.
Commissioner Gower, I visited the site, met on site with the applicant's representative, received and read the emails, and Mr. Chairman, I wasn't at the May 3rd meeting, but I did read the minutes and get up to speed on the discussion and everything that was of a concern at that meeting, so I'm ready to vote on this.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. I also visited the site, met with the applicant's representative on site, read several emails, and I believe that's it.
Commissioner Olivas, I received emails, visited the site, spoke with the applicant's representative, and also read the prior meeting minutes and feel confident in my ability to vote on this.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'm going to open public comment. I have some requests to speak forms here. If you would like to
Chair.
make a comment and haven't filled one of these out, please see Michelle. We will start with Asife
Wait, Chair
Gerard.
Gower, or I'm
Pardon me?
sorry, Chair Johnson, sorry. I'm
Sorry.
sorry. I just need to let you know that we received 18 letters in opposition for this project, and I will be giving them to the planner for the public record.
Okay, thank you. And you'll want to speak into the microphone. You can swing it over towards you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm Alice Gerard. To remind you of the last commissioner meeting, the commissioner asked why the live-work units. Any homeowner can have live-work.
And this is a quote from Jeff, appeal of SUPH, live work units, privacy issue of adjacent properties. A quote is, live work is being used to reduce the parking needs. By using the live work SUP, not only will the project decrease the need for parking spaces, the commercial road access is allowed needed by the neighborhood commercial zoning. Without the live work, residential only would not qualify the zoning for the zoning, and the road easement would not work. The residents of Skyline neighborhood are still very disappointed in the parking situation that is not addressed. The size of the project does not trigger parking and traffic studies, but the increase of the restaurant activity and successes of the businesses have. Here are just a couple of the photos. I think we have somebody else who's going to give you some photos here. Deliveries, waste management, trash removal, and customers. After several requests to Reno Direct over the years complaining the trust and the City of Reno Direct enforcement is less than impressive. When is a traffic study required? Hopefully not after all of this. Everyone familiar with the popular restaurants and the newly approved restaurant replacing Skyline Market have now increased the traffic and parking. No one has addressed the additional parking in the lot next to Barcelona being used that's no longer been able to provide legal parking, and storage. This already congested Barcelona parking lot and illegal parking lot will, with approval of the SUPs and the project approval, will no longer provide parking and storage and will become the access to the 14 townhomes. No plans for the relocation has been designed. I mean, this is crazy. I don't know where all these people are going to park. In every case, the current design, we will be appealing the current project design. Please decline both SUPs for this project. We have complained to Reno Direct for the misuses in this lot in question, and as of today's date, we have had no resolve or communications regarding the misuse, the property, or the noise. Zoned for neighborhood commercial, this lot has been used for illegal parking and real estate for a huge storage container for the last 5 years. This leaves us with no confidence that the city enforcement programs will prevent the live-work units to comply and other restrictions on the project. Who's going to police the live-work units? And as you can see, this is what we see on a daily basis. Parking, the staff for all the restaurants, there's like 13 cars down Cashill. This is pretty common. And I don't believe there's 6 units, parking spots are going to be designed just for them. And also, you can barely see, you'll see pictures later from someone else, that there's parking there too. I know I'm running out here. But this is, again, my home. Again, here we are. The balloons came up above, not where they said. They came up above our deck lot. And here we are again. Here we are. This is my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. Next is Marilyn McKay.
Good evening. I would like to address the parking issues. On page 6 of the August 1st staff report, it says based on the total calculations of 34 parking spaces required, there are 48 provided, by 28 garage spaces and 14 driveway spaces. However, here's my confusion. On the floor plans provided, A2.1, option A, 3 units, 1-car garage, 2-car driveway parking, that's 9 spaces. Option B is 4 units, 1-car garages, 1-car driveway, that's 8 spaces. A2-2 is option C, that's 4 units, 1-car garage, 1-car driveway parking, 8 spaces. Option D, 3 units, 1-car garage, 1-car driveway. That's 6 spaces. That totals 31 spaces. How'd they get 48? The report says there are parking spaces available on Cashill, but as you will see in the pictures, they are often in use. Okay. And she's got the pictures. Do you have Casio?
Parking.
Oh, this just shows parking on a pretty daily basis. And set 2. And that's the new restaurant across from Cashill. And that's their parking. And that is on Skyline. These are all one night. That's 5 cars on Skyline. And we're not sure how emergency trucks can get through. They have, there you go. When the residents need them, they have delivery trucks, they have big delivery trucks, garbage trucks. So we're not really sure how the parking works. The parking's bad right now, and that's before this project would go through. Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Barbara McKay.
That would be me. I'm Barbara. And I am back in front of you today, and I'm still confused about 14 on Cash Hill. Last time, I was arguing against the special use permit bringing in the 12 feet of dirt so they could bury a basement and put 2 stories on top of that, making it, they called it 2 stories, but it was actually 3 stories, and it was denied. Now they're trying a different strategy. They're putting 2 stories with a rooftop deck that looks to me like a lot like 3 stories. The top deck is, let's see, I will argue that the top deck is, part of it is just unused space in the back, and then there's a 12 by 16 portion that is covered with a 10-foot high roof, and then the very front part of the roof deck is opened. But it certainly looks like that is all a roof or a 3rd floor, even though they're just calling it a rooftop deck. There's really only a small part that is in front here that is the open deck area. And as a comparison, this is 14 on Tonopah Lofts, and it looks a lot like our project, but it is called 3 stories. It's got the same front decking area and then the area in the back. And they call theirs 3 stories. And I certainly think ours is also considered 3 stories, even though they're calling it just 2 stories. And they, the different heights that they give are rather confusing. At some point, they say the tallest building height is 29.5, and then the next point they say it's at 4922, and one place it's 4923. So it's really difficult to say exactly what the heights are on this. But I certainly argue that this is a 3-story building and not a 2-story building with the roof. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are all the requests to speak forms that I have on this item. Is there anyone else who would like to make a public comment on this item? Hearing and seeing none, I will close public comment and bring it back to the commission for questions. Who would like to get us started? Commissioner Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question for Jeff, please. If you would, Jeff, go over the parking numbers for us so we are clarified on the position that the city's taken.
Yeah,
parking.
so that was an error on my behalf. I'm sorry, I didn't edit the numbers based on the floor plan changes. But let me read to you the code section real quick, so you guys are aware of what the code requirement is and how they're actually meeting it. The code says 1 per bedroom, and then it says. 1 space of common parking for every 4 units that's provided on the street. So they are providing one per bedroom for each one of their units. And that's the key that we're trying to meet here. So yes, I didn't update the numbers based on the floor plans, and that's my apology, but they are still meeting the parking requirements based on their floor plans and based on the number of garage spaces and driveway spaces that they are providing.
Talk to me about 2 versus 3-story buildings.
Yeah, I'm gonna get to the definition of story in here real
Okay,
quick, and
appreciate it.
I can read that to you guys as well.
Okay, once again, Commissioner Hawkins has sent Jeff running back to his chair. So while we're waiting for him, are there some additional questions for staff or the applicant? Commissioner Weisky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Derek, please, the applicant's representative. Can you tell me what the elevations of the sidewalk are on the east end of the project and the west end of the project?
Yeah, hold on, let me grab that for you. Derek Kirkland for the record. So it appears that it's about where the, sorry, it's on here. So on this area down here, it's about a 4877. And on kind of the south end there, southeast end is about a 4882.
Okay, and what are your proposed ground floor elevations?
So this first building, the lower building, you can see that's the kind of the daylight basement. So it has
Building, let's take building number 1.
okay. So the lower elevation's at a 4882. And then up by the alley where there'll be basically the wall come up.
So you're 5 feet above sidewalk, curb and gutter at that point?
Correct.
Okay, building number 7, how high above sidewalk are you there?
We're basically, the back of the building is about right at sidewalk. And then keep in mind that lower building does have a 10-foot, there'll be a 10-foot step up where you go from the basement to the alleyway.
Okay, okay.
And that's how we that's how we basically make that kind of using the natural slope, which is similar to the project next to us is basically taking up that slope with that building so that we can get up to that pad.
Okay, all right. What's the maximum height you can build that's allowed by code on this street?
35 feet.
35 feet? Okay. So if your sidewalk is at a 4877, you are 4912 if you were flush with the sidewalk. So what you're doing is leaving 10 feet of grade in place. What I'm trying to get at is, and I know you've got to be above sidewalk level. Cash Hill was built to a design standard that the slope of the street is safe, correct? As far as we know.
Yeah, I assume so.
Okay? So you've got your buildings sitting on level ground instead of following the slope of the grade. of the street, of Cash Hill, correct?
I'm gonna defer to our engineer to talk more about the elevations and the grade.
Mike Davidson with Wood Rogers for the record. So the developer's wish was to make these flat pads, and so I believe, if I'm correct, with the discussions with the city, they would not let us access off Cashel. Is that correct? I thought that was. Okay, either way, so.
Was that a yes or a no?
Shawnee Dunnigan, Associate Civil Engineer for the record. So if they come off Cashel, there's significant impacts to the grading of that existing hill, which don't make that lot developable. So coming off this side, they've set the alley at the max slope they can, sloping down, and then they're stepping their buildings through the grade through stepping of the floors to go down that slope to catch as much of it as they can without creating as a surplus of grading. Does that answer your question?
So is it a surplus of grading, or is it that it can't be done? Because those are two different things.
The impacts on the site, if you were to come off Cashel, would make it unbuildable.
Right, but
for-
they could still use the same access agreement that they have established, right?
Yes.
And then they could step those pads down as they move west.
Yes, and this is what this design does.
Okay, so
So
every one
the-
of those pads is stepped down going west. They're not level like as they're shown in their elevations. The elevations by the architect show the buildings all being level across there.
Yeah, so they're showing each separately, so it's a
Did
little
I just,
confusing, but the alley is set up and the garages come down, and then on those buildings that are to the northish, that basement, I guess you could say, is stepped down about 10 feet.
okay.
Do you mean going east to west? I guess.
Tell you what, Shawnee, come here for a minute. Why don't you put that up on the overhead? To me, those look like they're in line. They're not stepped.
So then you're meaning going east to west on the side?
Correct.
Okay, so they're gonna, with their access, you can only slope it so much. We have max percentages for that for access and safety, especially with the winter conditions we have. So they can only slope that road at a max 12%? 10%. So that only will get you so much grade where they're tying in. So they've maxed out what they can do with this design. Just here, they're not, it's just gonna be tilted at
Okay.
that 10%.
All right, that explains it for me. Thank you, Shawnee. I have no further questions at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioners. I will bring to the Commissioners' attention, one of the comments that came up was fire access. We do have the fire chief here. If there are any questions that Commission has for him in interest of what we're doing, I guess I will ask Chief to come up. I do have one. I just want to verify.
Good evening, Dave Cochran, Reno Fire Chief.
Welcome, Dave. Thank you.
You bet.
So the applicant indicated that, I believe Station 7 ran a truck there, and that they've modified their design to provide a hammerhead turnaround in case the loop around the existing facility is not available. One of the concerns that was brought up during public comment is that that also happens to be a loading area for the restaurant. Now, I'll talk to the applicant about that in a minute, but looking at it from a fire access standpoint, in the situation where there is other traffic back there, is the access still able to be maintained?
Yes, it is, and that's the reason for the hammerhead. If there was some reason that we couldn't drive around the building, which we can, Engine 7 from the Skyline Station there did physically go out, drive around the building was not a problem. But if they had to, they could use that, of course, the access to the facility, the buildings and the hammerhead in conjunction to go back out the way they came in.
Okay, and so then the width of that area is wide enough that if there was another vehicle there, you could still get around them and access the site. Is that the way the design is?
Right. Excuse me. With the radius on those turns, yeah, it's designed so that they can pull into the parking area there. It's not the parking area, but the drive area there on the project, and be able to reverse back out and turn around.
Okay. I'm going to follow up with Derek, but before I let you go, I just want to see if any of the other commissioners have any questions. Commissioner Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a clarification, is second and third stories? That Jeff was
For
gonna
the
look for?
chief,
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're good. Thank you very much.
you bet. Thank
Appreciate
you.
that. So Derek, if you could, please, to that, on the design, the hammerhead, and I got the turnaround and everything, I still have a little bit of concern in terms of what the width is that I'm looking at there on the back side of the existing facility. Deliveries, other things that are there, it seems tight, and, you know, in an emergency situation, it's gonna seem even tighter. What, are you expanding that area as part of the design and as part one? And part two, is there any discussion with the existing commercial activities there with respect to how they're being serviced that could be modified by some type of agreement to simplify or make it easier for access to your project?
Yeah, so I have, so we are, creating the hammerhead situation. So we are widening that area a little bit to make that all work. I think the other part of it is there is a condition in the staff report that requires us to put no parking signage up and paint the curb red. And so that doesn't obviously create a situation where somebody couldn't park there. But I think you have 14 residences that would be living there now that if they can't get in there, they're going to make a complaint, where there's nobody there today that are complaining about it. And so our applicant, and I can let him verify if you like, but there has been conversations with the neighboring business owner. They did acquire the property from him, and he's aware that, the delivery drivers, it's an education thing they're going to have to go through. But between the fire access expansion, the hammerhead, no parking signage, painting the curbs red, and then working with the adjacent business owner to educate the delivery trucks that they're going to have to go. They're not going to be able to pull back there anymore. I think everybody's on board with that and understands that that's going to be a change that comes forward. And it's not like these are going to come up overnight. So there is time, especially when these go under construction. We'll have a construction access plan, and we'll start to educate them as this project moves forward, if it were to be approved.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, have you found an answer to Commissioner Hawkins?
Yeah, sorry, our code is very long. So the definition of story is that portion of a building included between the upper surface of any floor and the upper surface of the floor above, except that the topmost story shall be that portion of a building included between the upper surface of the topmost floor and the ceiling of the roof above. This is where the key is. If the finished floor level directly above a usable or unused floor space is more than 6 feet above grade as defined herein, and so this is the grade of the previous floor, for more than 50% of the total of the perimeter, that's defined as a story at that point. So this doesn't exceed more than, the portion that's above 6 feet or doesn't exceed more than 50%, if that makes sense. It's lower than that threshold. So that second story is not necessarily considered, or that third story is not a story. It's just an exit out onto the deck, and decks are not considered stories.
Thank you.
Commissioners, additional questions or discussion? Commissioner Gower.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just ask Jeff to follow up on that. Can we put that exhibit up that has the cross sections that labels the stories that the applicant put together with a line of sight going over the top.
See if Derek can find it faster than me. This is better because it's an 11 by 17, so it's more easily readable here.
So the building that's towards the southern portion of the site there, yeah, that one. If we could, Michelle, if we could zoom in on that one just a little bit. Yeah, please. A little bit more. So Jeff, what you're saying when you gave your explanation of the stories, so you're saying that the roof deck, which is on the northern portion, that's not considered a story because it's a deck. It's an
Correct. It
outdoor
doesn't have
space.
it doesn't have a roof.
No
to
roof.
It. Mhm.
So the portion that is farther back, talking about unoccupied space, is that space that's like synonymous with an attic area?
Yeah, I mean the architects here they can say what that could potentially be used for, but it's non-habitable space. You can't put anything in there from a people standpoint. And if you look at this right here, this is 6 feet 8 inches. So that tells you how tall this really is. I mean, when you go back there, it's going to be less than that 6 feet.
So maybe I could get clarification from the architect. I'm just trying to understand what the rationale is for having that 6 foot tall space there. What is that space?
Angela Bigodi, Van Wert Bigodi Architects. That space is part of the structure. It's not meant to be any occupied space. So it's part of the roof trussing, if you will.
So it's just open air? I mean, is it insulated space? Is it, I mean, I'm just
It could
trying to
be.
get,
It hasn't been developed either way. It's just part of the structure.
it's just structure at this point. Okay.
I can help explain habitable space as well. A space in a building for living, sleeping, eating, or cooking. Bathrooms, toilet rooms, closets, halls, storage, or utility spaces and similar areas are not considered habitable spaces. So the roof deck is not considered a habitable space, therefore it does not qualify as a story. So that's an additional explanation added to what Jeff just explained.
Mr. Chairman, can I jump in on that? Angela, did you say storage was considered a habitable space?
It is not.
Storage is not considered a habitable space?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All I got, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Additional questions? Discussion? Thoughts on this? Nobody wants to start. I guess I got a couple of discussion points I wanted to throw out there. I might have a question. Sorry, I'm going to back up. Since I'm the chair, I can do this. It was Commissioner Weisky, but now it's back to me. Jeff, maybe circling back to this issue of live work and the rationale of what's going on there. The applicant's representative explained that because of the zoning for the site, that you would need to have some element of live work. It couldn't just be residential. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, correct. When you're in the neighborhood commercial zoning district, there are additional use regulations that require some sort of mixture. There is also the intention behind what a neighborhood commercial zoning district is. And it's a neighborhood serving commercial district. You can have residential, but you're supposed to have some sort of commercial component with it. And that's why they have the live work component, which is then triggering the special use permit.
Okay. So then, to that end, as a part of the staff report and the conditions, the live workspaces are subject to accessory home occupation standards.
Correct. And so we didn't want to go all the way to the point where we're like, all right, bring it on. You can put a restaurant in here or something like that, right? That would cause an unforeseen impact to, because there's such a wide array of uses that could potentially be allowed in the neighborhood commercial district. It would have an unforeseen impact to surrounding uses that we didn't really necessarily think could be controlled. If you have the home occupation standard in this case, there are defined standards that are already used throughout residential neighborhoods in the entire community.
Okay, so let me stop you there, because now you're getting to I guess, the crux of my question, because it seems like there's two different ways we could go with this. By putting this restriction, I guess, on the live-work component of it, you've essentially taken, if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, you've forced the applicant to put a commercial use into the district in order to meet the zoning, and then restricted that commercial use back to what is only, is applicable for a residential zone in the first place.
Correct. So what
So why not go to a zone change?
So what the difference is here, in a typical single-family residential zone or single-family residential project, we're not forcing them to put commercial occupation or the ability to do that in there. You're not putting storefront. You're not designing this to technically create workspace. We don't have something in our code that says you have to put an office in each one of these uses. Essentially, what neighborhood commercial is doing is saying you have to have that mix. What we're doing in this case is saying, look, we have a unique situation where this is on a constrained site, and so we have to put some sort of standards in place in order to make sure that it doesn't spill over onto adjacent sites. That's part of what we're looking at with the compatibility of uses and a special use permit. We could let them free roam, but then we can't really control that. The easiest way to do that is to put home occupation standards in there, because that's something that's already enforced on a regular basis. That's something our code enforcement officers know what to look for. So that's why we use that as a basis. We could put a number of different conditions in there to say only this use can be allowed, only this use can be allowed, only this use can be allowed, but you can never really predict what types of uses change with changing technology, and at least with the home occupation standards, that provides a good framework.
But I guess I agree with that. But there's kind of two things happening here. You're saying we're putting this restriction on there because there's a lot of other things that could happen under the neighborhood commercial zoning that would be a lot more intense, which is what we're trying to restrict to this particular home occupancy standard. But it's already zoned neighborhood commercial. So in theory, those higher intensity uses should be acceptable. So again, I go back to the question, would it, if we were looking at a zone change, which based on neighborhood compatibility, we have single-family residential behind us, we have, essentially residential adjacent to, I lose my directions, but adjacent on Cash Hill and across the street on Cash Hill, we have residential uses. So I guess I'm confused why staff is not looking at that. I mean, they could do this exact same project, come before us with a zone change, and then the special use permit would actually be this residential adjacency to the neighborhood commercial where the restaurant is.
I don't even think they would need a special use permit at that point for residential adjacency if they were building this project.
And so then, under that scenario, what would we be looking at? Because we have the parking being met, according to what you're saying, and then any live work and the limited accessory home occupation standards would actually just fall into the category of the extra spaces that are required based on 4 units.
I think there's a little bit of a difference here that, so we could say, all right, what if they were community commercial or, well, arterial commercial would never be zoned here. But say for example, they're community commercial. They could build this exact same project too without the live work component. They could also build a shopping center. The thing is, we're looking at this in comparison to the design that they're proposing. If we don't want to restrict the type of types of uses that are there, then we need to start designing this project that would accommodate different types of uses up to, say, potentially the more of the extreme options in a neighborhood commercial allowed. Which is why when we look at shopping centers, we want to make sure that there's a good balance of parking ratios that are provided in there. But they're proposing a project that has the live work component in there, and they're not proposing a full-on parking lot that would accommodate something like a restaurant use or something like that in the future. So what we have to do is take a look at that and say, all right, well, what balance can we strike to make sure that parking doesn't spill over into adjacent neighborhoods and things like that? And that's one of the things that we have to look at as part of the master plan, as part of the findings and everything like that. So that's the controlling mechanism to avoid parking impacts to surrounding properties based on what they're designing. They're designing what's allowed in code right now. We're not saying that they're not. We're just preventing something from being an issue to surrounding properties.
Thank you. Commissioner Weisky.
Thank you. Jeff, don't sit down. Hypothetical situation, let's say they did come in with a residential zone change request. What would be the maximum height they could build out to? Do you know?
It depends on the residential zoning category.
Okay.
So let's say, for example, they chose one of the MF21 or MF30. I believe the maximum height in those two zones is 45 feet.
Okay.
Whereas if you go down to an MF14 standard, which is similar to neighborhood commercial in terms of the setbacks and everything like that, their height is 35 feet.
Okay. So the maximum, and then that would be allowed by right, and that would not be coming before us.
Unless they were going through and subdividing, which they are proposing here, that would come before you with a tentative map. I don't recall the trigger for a special use permit for the townhomes. I believe it's 50. The applicant can elect to up that site plan review, which would normally be required, up to a special use permit in order to streamline their process, which they've done as part of this project. So it's virtually similar to an MF14 zone. The only difference is there's a requirement that says you have to have some sort of commercial component.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask one more question of Shawnee before?
Since I put it back to questions,
Yeah.
of course you can, Commissioner
Thank you.
Weisky.
I'm just piggybacking on you. You changed the rules. Shawnee, what is the roadway coming in from the existing strip shop to the east in between the two rows of townhouses? Are we talking a severe grade change at that transition? What does that slope look like in the asphalt? Because your answer before got me thinking about, okay, now if we've got too much slope on this asphalt and we're worried about wintertime conditions, do we have a situation where we have out-of-control cars coming down a slope into these units?
Shawnee Dennigan, Associate Civil Engineer for the record. So that's why we have set those max limits on the slope, is that is what can handle the winters and the vehicles. And so what they can do when they come and do their tie-in is do a gradual slope and then come down. So it's not going to be just an abrupt drop off. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That explains it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Do you need to add or clarify that, or no? Okay.
I think we're good. Thank you. Okay. Comments or discussion?
Mr. Chairman, just a discussion item if I could.
Please.
So related to the findings, do we have to make tonight for the project that's proposed before us and that's been evaluated in the staff report? Looking at findings, particularly the ones that couldn't be met last time, which I believe were A, E, and H. In my opinion, the applicant has done a good job of going back, and particularly for me, for finding E, which talks about the scale, intensity, density, height, layout, setbacks, et cetera, of the development. And as the applicant went over in his presentation, talking about the roof elevations of the various buildings on site relative to the adjacent properties, I think the compatibility is there height-wise. I asked about the design and the stories. I'm a little bit, I guess, I mean, I understand the definition of a story. I think the design of the building is maybe a little bit unique. So that architectural and overall design compatibility, maybe I'm not as strong in that component of the finding, but I think overall, as I mentioned, they've done a good job of fitting this project in to meet all of the various components, as Jeff mentioned, to a T in his presentation. So I feel the same way, and I can meet all the findings.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Weisky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can now say that I can make the findings this time around that I could not make before because of the redesign. Knowing that these buildings by right could be another 7 to 8 feet taller, I feel that the applicant, the architect, and the applicant's representative listened to what we were saying and adjusted the height of the structures, the design of the structures to actually meet the neighborhood. Knowing what could be built there by right under NC could take away more of the view than what is being proposed today. And I don't know that, there is some inconvenience, but another 8 feet of height, which is allowed, would certainly take it all away. So with the redesign that has come in, the points that I made specifically in my not being able to make findings in May, I can now make those findings.
Thank you, Commissioner. Additional comments? I guess I would throw out a lot of comments and concern about some parking in the area. I understand I've both gone to the restaurant there and tried to go to a weekend soccer game at Mary Gojak Park and had to park quite a long ways away. I don't know that this is, I actually don't believe this project's going to have much impact on that street parking. What I think it is going to do is clean that area up a little bit. I think you are going to have people that are living there, that are parked there, and that are concerned with what's going on. And I'm going to go on the assumption, rightly or wrongly, but that shopping center that was there has a parking lot, and sometimes that parking lot gets full, but often it's not. And I think the spillover parking that's currently on that lot should be accommodated by the parking lot, because that is the people that are going to that area. I did also have some concerns about the fire access, and I think that was addressed by the project by widening the driveway, having the fire department come out and actually run through it, and then hearing Chief indicate that he's comfortable with what's going on there. So those items, while not directly related to the findings that we had issues with last time, were all points of discussion and came up tonight. So I certainly feel that this project has addressed the initial items, and I think that the redesign and discussion has helped with those others as well. So unless there's additional discussion, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner
Commissioner
Weisky. In case of LDC 18-005814 on Cash Hill, based upon compliance with the applicable findings, I move to approve the tentative map and special use permit subject to the conditions, and I can make all the conditions for both.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Gower, I'll second, and I can make all the findings, particularly as mentioned, finding E.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. I will read into the record for the project, the appeal process. Any final action not including recommendations or failure to take action by the Planning Commission may be appealed to the Reno City Council by the applicant, the mayor, or a city council member, or any person who is aggrieved by the action or inaction. An appeal, together with fees, must be filed with the city clerk within 10 calendar days, starting on the day after written notice of the action is filed with the city clerk, And if the 10th calendar day falls on a weekend or holiday when the clerk's office is not open, the appeal may be filed on the next business day. Okay. Moving on on the agenda, item number 7, Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Liaison Report. Commissioner Hawkins.
We have a 13 August retreat from 5:30 to 8:30 with the group over there.
Commissioner Hawkins, I think Kim's email was mistaken. I think it's
Oh, it was?
September 30th, yeah.
I'll confirm that. We have no Truckee Meadows Regional Planning meetings or retreats in the month of August. Our next meeting is in September.
Just a reminder, though, Mr. Chairman, that Enterprise Partners Consulting is at Regional Planning next week, hosting an open house if you're interested in talking about affordable housing.
Excellent, thank you.
Yep.
Item number 8, staff announcements.
Thank you, Claudia Hanson, Planning Manager. So at the last couple council meetings, Stonegate was certified, which means it has completed the process now for the entitlements, for the PUD entitlement. The Panther Meadow zone change from NC to CC was approved. Big Rock Sports hazardous material, which you saw, but then also had to be approved by council, that was approved. The Pennington Estates, or Estate, was continued, and that will be going next Wednesday at 6 o'clock. And then just this last Monday, we had the joint council and county commission meeting regarding those 2 amendments on the Reno Stead Corridor Joint Plan. The site on Lemon, that was the bank site, that this body approved and the county denied, was approved by both bodies. So that one moved forward. And the Echeverria project that both this body and the County Planning Commission denied, the removal from the Reno Stead Corridor Joint Plan area was approved. The master plan amendment was denied. Get all that? Then the, probably the biggest announcement, I think the most important announcement, next Thursday, August 9th, we will be having the kickoff meeting, I would call it, for the Title 18 update. As you know, quarterly, we do a community development discussion over at McKinley during the lunch hour. So we're pairing that up with the kickoff for the Title 18 update. So we invite the standard people that go to that. It's typically the development community for the most part, but anybody is welcome. And that will be the introduction to the Title 18 update. And so that one will be during the lunch hour, and then that evening, we will hold the same information for the general public. So it'll be the same information presented a little bit differently because we have primarily developers and those in the construction industry coming during the day, so we will gear it towards them. Same information, just presented a little bit differently that evening to the general public. Kind of going over the timeline, the structure of it, how we're going to be using the consultant, how people can get involved over the next, we'll say 2 years-ish, and address it and go over the main issues that are going to, the main topics that will be coming up through the Title 18 update. Did you have a question?
Mr. Chairman, may I please?
Mr. Weisky.
Claudia, could we get an email reminder to our Planning Commission email addresses of of the upcoming Thursday agenda and
course.
meetings?
Yep, I will get you on the kind of notification list on that. So you'll get, I think you're going to have your own one also, but I think
Right.
we'll get you, we'll put you on the
But at
general
least
one
it's
as well.
kind of a reminder for those of us who
Sure.
may not put PC at the top of our lists.
What?
That's crazy talk. I'm going to revoke your temporary chair privileges for that one.
I didn't say me. I said some.
And that concludes my announcements.
Thank you. I think I actually must be on that list because my non-PC email gets all of the updates about those upcoming development activities. So I had received an email invite on that already.
Maybe Moody Weisky needs to get their name on some
I wasn't going to
lists.
say anything. Yeah. Okay, item number 9, commissioner suggestions for future agenda items. Seeing none, move on to item 10, public comment. This item is for either public comment or any action item for any general public comment. Michelle, do we have any requests to speak forms on this item?
No, we do not.
Seeing nobody in the audience, I will close public comment and move it on to item 11, request for adjournment.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you very much.